All right, y'all, it's nerdy segment time. This is one of my favorite times on the show. Let me show you what Jeff Stein from the Washington Post is saying about Joe Biden's tax plan. We have these specifics to report to you. Major Biden tax hikes eyed for next bill, not final, include the corporate tax rate is going from 21% to 28%. I'm going to come back to all these, by the way, and break them down when I'm done here. A global minimum tax for corporations is going to be 21%. The top income tax rate, or actually the global minimum tax, I don't know if that applies to the wealthy and corporations or just corporations. Top income tax rate they want to bring to 39.6%. If I'm not mistaken, that's where it was in the Obama years. They want to end fossil fuel subsidies, which is basically a negative income tax rate for fossil fuel companies. They want to tax investment gains over $1 million as wage income, as opposed to using the capital gains rate, which is lower. And they want to tax assets passed on at death, and they don't want to do anything different with the SALT tax. So the SALT tax, for those of you who don't know, is the state and local tax? Yes, it's a deduction for the state and local tax. So what happens in a lot of blue states, wealthier people have to pay a decent amount of state and local tax, and it used to be the case that you can deduct that from your federal tax bill. But then Trump got rid of that. It's an effective tax hike on wealthier people in blue states. And it looks like Biden doesn't want to change that. He wants to keep it like it is. So he wants to keep the tax hike on wealthier people in blue states. I think that's fine. I think that makes sense. I'm generally in favor of tax increases on the wealthy. So now let's break it down. So the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%. Is that good, bad, or somewhere in the middle? I'm going to rate somewhere in the middle. Here's why. Because before Trump, the corporate tax rate was 35%. So he's not even saying, let's go back to that pre-Trump level of 35%. He's saying, I'll split the difference and do 28%. That's classic neoliberal corporate Biden and classic Democrat in the year 2021. That's what that is. Now, when the rate was 35%, it's not the case that all the corporations were paying 35% because you have to factor in all the loopholes and the deductions. And some companies were probably paying 30%. Some companies were paying zero. Some companies somehow got a negative tax rate, some big corporations. So when it was 35% on paper, that the nominal rate is not the same as the effective rate. The effective rate varied. Now, if Biden takes it from 21% to 28%, and he also eliminates the loopholes and deductions, and the 28% is effectively a higher tax rate than the nominal 35% was, then it would unquestionably be a good thing, but I'm skeptical that he's actually going to do that. You know, that's actually what JFK did. JFK, he eliminated loopholes and deductions, so even though his higher rate, top marginal tax rate of about 70% under JFK, even though that was lower than the Eisenhower years, which were like 93% top marginal rate, effectively the wealthy paid more because JFK eliminated loopholes and deductions. And by the way, I'll get to marginal rates in a minute. For those of you who don't understand what that means, we'll come back to that. Now, the global minimum tax is 21%. I have to say, I don't get this one because we covered this story the other day. It's totally unenforceable. So it doesn't mean anything. It's like it's a complete virtue signal of like, yeah, well, I'm in favor of raising taxes on the wealthy and corporations. I want to do a global minimum tax. Wonderful. How do you enforce it? Well, the OECD, maybe with something and some other thing, can then make it the thing with the happening and whatnot. There's no way to enforce it, so what are you doing? It's a waste of time. So I don't know why anybody would do this unless the whole point is just the virtue signal, which is pathetic. Then we get top income tax rate to 39.6%. Is that bad, good, or somewhere in the middle? Again, I'm going to rank it somewhere in the middle. It's just going back to the Obama rate. Now, by the way, now is the time to talk about marginal tax rates. So this is something that I'm not sure there's any Republican politician or Republican media figure who actually understands what a marginal tax rate is, or they do and they're just complete liars and they're lying to you on purpose. But because this is what people went after Bernie for. People are like, Bernie Sanders wants a tax rate of 70-something%. Ridiculous. The government's going to take 70% of your money. The government's going to take 70% of your money. Nonsense. So what a marginal rate is, it means every dollar above a certain line gets taxed at that, whatever the rate is. So in let's take Bernie's case. I'm not sure what his line was, but it was like 5 million or 10 million or somewhere in there, maybe 3 million, something like that. So it's not that the government comes and they say, oh, you have $3 million, let me take 70% of it. No, it's more like you have $4 million that you made this year. Every dollar from 3 million to 4 million will be taxed at 70%, and everything below that is taxed at a lower rate. So, in other words, you could have a top marginal tax rate of 100% over $50 million. And that first $50 million is taxed at a much lower rate. So if you're, playing the victim over that, it's kind of absurd because you're going to have millions of dollars. Again, they mislead you into thinking the tax rates in question are just the government taking that percentage of all of your money, and it's not even close to that. It's not remotely close to that. So it's insane and discouraging when you have conversations about tax rates because every elected Republican politician and every Republican media figure, they're either being dishonest or they're complete idiots and they don't know the most basic things about the tax code. So anyway, to go back to the 39.6% rate, good. It's better than what we have now. I actually don't even remember what Trump reduced it to. Was it 35% or 30%? It was something like that. But they want to bring it back to 39.6. It's in the middle. That's not bad or good. It's somewhere in the middle. The original proposal, I think, needs to be way higher than that. That you should be proposing at least like 60%. Because all this stuff is going to get chopped down in negotiations anyway. So, why are you proposing what already would be the compromise? Because really, he's not, I don't think Biden's too keen on this stuff anyway. I think he's not terribly offended by trickle-down, if you want to know the truth. Ending fossil fuel subsidies, that's unquestionably a good thing. I don't even need to explain what that means. Stop giving taxpayer money to fossil fuel companies. They're phenomenally wealthy anyway. They don't need us to give them a welfare check from now until the end of time. Taxing investment gains over $1 million as wage income, that's good, but, I really think that almost all capital gains income should be taxed as if it's income. And, I don't know why if you gamble for a living in the stock market, you get to pay a lower tax rate than if you actually work for a living. If anything, it should be the opposite, that if you work for a living, you should pay a lower rate than somebody who just sits around all day and gambles. Because that's what the stock market is. It's gambling. It's like a casino. So either link it all and have it all taxed as income, or if anything, you should be biased more in favor of if you work for a living, you get a lower tax rate. So over 1 million as wage income, good, but at the very least, I would say it should be, anything over $100,000 in income from capital gains should be taxed at the income tax rates. And then finally, tax assets passed on at death. That's good. And the SALT we already discussed. So listen, overall, what am I giving Biden for this tax proposal, for this tax plan? I'll give it a C+. This stuff is good, but it's already half measures. And it's going to get chopped down like crazy in negotiations, because now is when you start talking to Joe Manchin and people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and you bring this to them, and then knowing Biden, he wants the Republicans to get involved, and, you have to start the negotiation from a decently progressive position, and he's starting the negotiation from a compromised corporatist position. So I don't think, I'm not optimistic that any of this stuff's going to get through, and definitely none of it's going to get through if you don't reform the filibuster. That's the reality. And of course, by the way, Republicans are going to lie about this through and through. They're going to say stuff like, Biden wants to raise taxes on working Americans in the middle class. That is complete and utter garbage. Just lies. That would be lies. When they say that, and they're probably already saying it, just know it's complete bullshit and they're lying to you on purpose. The criticism of Joe Biden's plan is that it's not aggressive enough on the wealthy and corporations. The criticism is not that he's raising taxes on working people. In fact, he's simply not doing that, period, at all. So, but now you know the facts on it. We'll see what happens with the negotiation, but I'm really not optimistic that any of this stuff is going to get implemented.